All right, it's now time to do our NFL predictions for Wildcard Weekend 2026. I guess it's the 2025 season, but it is now 2026. And up until last week, here's where our points are at. Now, all season long, 4 of us have been making predictions. Myself, my oldest son, Ethan, he's 18, my 15-year-old son, Brady, and my 6-year-old son, Lincoln. Now, Lincoln has always been trailing a little bit. I'll be honest with you. Lincoln's 6, and he likes to make big upset predictions. He doesn't always go. He doesn't know the teams as well as the rest of us do, and he's just kind of learning. But he's learned a lot this year, and he's really fell in love with football. And so going into the Week 18, that's where our points are at. I had 168. Ethan's 164. Brady's 172. Lincoln's 149. Now, I will say this. Lincoln, once again, said, you know what? I'm going to make these upset predictions. I'm going to pick what everybody else doesn't, because really last week, let's go back to this. Last week was, sometimes they set people. It's kind of harder to predict. Well, Lincoln won the week, and he ended up with 12 points. Brady there with 7. Ethan ended up with 10, and I had 7 points. So what that means is, through the entire season, Brady ended up winning 179. I finished with 175. Ethan 1 point behind me at 174. And Lincoln got 162. So he did improve and kind of got closer there. And the way we're doing the season this year, Brady wins the season. So he's got the honors there. But now that we're going into the playoffs, we're starting from scratch. It's anyone's game. And we're going to start with the first game, which is taking place Saturday afternoon. And you've got the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Carolina Panthers. Now, what an interesting matchup. Carolina could not even win themselves into the playoffs. They lost to Tampa Bay, but because of the 3-way tie and Atlanta got hot and won the last 2 games, that put them in the playoffs. They won the division with a losing record, but they do get to play a home game, and they're going to take on the Los Angeles Rams. I've watched a lot of different predictions and analysis this week, and a lot of people have the Rams going to the Super Bowl. Now, that could happen. So let's make the predictions for the first game here, the Los Angeles Rams at the Carolina Panthers, and I will say all 4 of us picked the Rams to win. I don't think it's going to be close. Carolina, they can win. It really, in the NFL, anybody can beat anybody. But I see the Rams win this, and they move on to the next round. I was hoping the Rams were going to play the Eagles, because as far as all the teams that are in the playoffs, as long as the Eagles lose, I'll be satisfied. And I wanted the Rams to play them, but they didn't. So Rams win this. We move on to the late game. We got the Green Bay Packers taking on the Chicago Bears at Soldier Field. This is, of course, a NFC North matchup. And, I don't know. I just don't know what to make of the Packers. They lost to Cleveland this year. They tied the Cowboys. Those should be 2 things right there that should disqualify them for the playoffs. Of course, they set players this past week, and, Love's been injured. I just don't know. And then you got the Bears. They won a lot of games very close. I will definitely say probably 10 weeks into the year, come on, the Bears are not for real. They won so many games. I remember 3 or 4 years ago, Minnesota won tons of games very close. And I'm like, that is not going to last in the playoffs. And I think they lost the first round. So, will the Bears lose the first round? Well, that was 10 weeks in. The Bears have impressed me since then, beating the 49ers and beating some other teams. And, of course, they lost last week, though, to the Lions. And I didn't watch all that game, so maybe some of the players didn't play. I don't think that's the case, because they were still going for number 1 seed. But, so the question is, will it be Green Bay? Will it be Chicago? And I'll say this. Brady, Lincoln, and I have the Bears winning. Ethan went with Green Bay. Now, of course, he's going to get double points if that happens. So that's one of the, we all get the same amount of points no matter what happens there, win or lose. But this way, Ethan went with Green Bay. And Green Bay definitely could beat them. But I'm still going to go with Chicago here. They're home. The interesting thing is all year I've kind of discredited the Bears. Now I'm going to go with them winning, and watch, they'll probably lose. And then we move on to Sunday's games. There's 3 games on Sunday, and you have the Buffalo Bills versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. What a matchup this is. You got one team who might have the best player in the NFL, Josh Allen, and they've been just right at that door the last 5 or 6 years. Buffalo went to 4 Super Bowls back in the 90s and lost all 4. And then pretty much after that, they have not been good. Up until they got Josh Allen, they got a new coach, and they've been really close. They're kind of like the Lions have been. They're really close, but they just can't win the big game. Then you got Jacksonville, who halfway through the season, I wouldn't even put them in the playoffs. The Colts were dominating the South, and then the Colts completely fell apart and didn't even make the playoffs. Jacksonville is playing really good. A lot of people aren't talking about them like they're talking about maybe the Patriots or even the Broncos, but they're playing really good. And this is a matchup that, man, I don't. Neither one of these teams are my favorite, but I would be happy with either one of them winning. Lincoln went with the Bills. The rest of us, Ethan, Brady, and I went with the hometown Jaguars. Now, will the Jaguars go to the Super Bowl? I don't know. It's interesting because some of the best teams in the AFC this year, Jacksonville, Patriots, Broncos, are all kind of like rebuilding. Or, they just, like, Jacksonville just got a new coach. So it's interesting that the top teams are teams that haven't really been there, or at least for the last few years. But Buffalo, they're always in it, but they're the underdog. So, like I said, Lincoln's got Buffalo. The rest of us have Jacksonville. I'm looking forward to this game. Then you have the afternoon game on Sunday. I'll say this right now. 2 of my top 3 or 4 least favorite teams. Of course, you got the defending champion Philadelphia Eagles. I'm a Cowboys fan, and so the Eagles are the top rival of the Cowboys. And, I don't dislike the Giants and the Commanders like I dislike Philly, but I think really a lot of it has to do with the fact that Philly's just been really good for the last several years. They won the Super Bowl last year. They won a Super Bowl a few years ago. And, of course, being a Cowboys fan, how can you root for the 49ers? I can't. But honestly, if I had my way in this, I would rather the Niners win just because the Eagles won last year. And I probably dislike the Eagles a little bit more. Now, what do we pick? Brady, Lincoln, Ethan all went with the Niners. I'm taking Philly. A lot of people aren't talking about Philly. They're not probably as good, or they're not, at least haven't played as good as they did last year. They had some losses. They won a lot of games barely. But they are the champs. They are in Philly. And the Niners, they're not. I watched the Niners, the Seahawks game, and the Seahawks are probably really a lot better than the Eagles. And it wasn't, to me, it wasn't really even close with the Niners winning that. Niners, I do not think are going to the Super Bowl. I'll give them credit, though. They've had tons of injuries. It's amazing that they're in the position they're in. Everybody else takes the Niners. I'm going with the Eagles. Then you have the Sunday night game. Another interesting one here. You have the Patriots with new head coach Mike Vrabel. Of course, he was in Tennessee for several years. Nobody thought the Patriots were going to be this good. And, of course, their quarterback, he's right. He's in the MVP talk. They won more games than anybody, I think. They won 14 games. It's amazing. It really is. And, of course, we all sat through and all watched through all those years and years and years of Brady and Belichick and the Patriots winning everything. So, in some ways, I don't want to see the Patriots there. However, this is a totally different Patriots team. And I like Vrabel. He's an Ohio State guy. I have nothing against their Drake May, their quarterback, and they're an underdog. They're rebuilding. It's amazing they're an underdog. And then you got the Chargers. They're the team kind of like the Bills over the years. It's just they get close. I don't think they've ever won a Super Bowl. I know the last one I remember them being in was, I think, in '94 when they played the Niners, over 30 years ago. You got Harbaugh there, and he always finds a way to win. I've always been a Harbaugh fan. Well, of course, until he went to Michigan. And, when he started coaching at Michigan, I didn't root for him those years. But I've always liked Harbaugh, and now he's back there. So I'm probably rooting for him and the Chargers to win this. I don't want to see the Patriots in it again, even though, like I said, it's a totally different team. Here's what happened, though. We all picked the Patriots. They're in Foxborough. We were there this summer. Went to the stadium. We actually ate lunch there in the middle of the summer in Massachusetts. But we all have the Patriots winning, even though I'd like to see the Chargers. And then you had the Monday night game. You got Houston versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Pittsburgh has kind of been that team, kind of like the Panthers this year. They're just in a bad division. The Steelers are not bad. They're just not good. They're not great. They're barely good. They did win the division, though, but when you're in a division with the Bengals and the Browns, and you're in a division with the Ravens, who's usually really good, but this year were not that great. Of course, it came down to last week's game, and they won. And here's the thing. I mentioned the Eagles and the Niners being my top 3 disliked teams. Pittsburgh is also in that top 3. And for years, Pittsburgh's been my least favorite team. I can't stand Pittsburgh. Don't want to see them win. I think the Eagles have that honor now. And I'll say this about Pittsburgh. They have Rodgers, and I've never been a Packers fan or a big Rodgers fan, but because he's the old guy, I kind of root for him. I rooted for Brady when he was with the Bucs because it was kind of at the end, and it's just a good story, and I'm about his age. So in some ways, I'd root for Pittsburgh here. I'll just say this. I'm not going to root for Pittsburgh, but if they win, it's not the end of the world because of Rodgers and because of that. And I'll give Pittsburgh credit, probably the best run team in football, over the last 50 years. But they're playing Houston. And like we said earlier with the Jaguars, I didn't expect them to be in the playoffs because the Colts were doing so good. But the Texans have been playing really good football. They got C.J. Stroud, who I love, Buckeye. I want the Texans to win. And here's what happened. Lincoln, he went with Pittsburgh. The rest of us went with Houston. So Lincoln will get the double points if he ends up winning that. Should be fun. I'm looking forward to the weekend of football. You got the college games on, of course, and then you also have the NFL Wildcard weekend. Enjoy the week. We'll be back. I'll give you an update, and we'll make the picks for the divisional round next weekend.